everyone. I am so excited to have you back for another week of the Wealth Cafe. And this week we have a special guest, Jamie Van Cuyk, who is one of the authors in our book coming out November 14th for pre-sale called Rise and Find. And I am so excited to have Jamie here today. She is the guru and specialist in all things hiring for both your business, and she also talks about it in your personal life as well, which I think we could all use a little more of. So, Jamie, thanks for joining me today.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
And so I am dying to know, as we are coming into, a lot of us have already started the school year with kids, nieces, nephews. I send my dog to camp sometimes. And, we have to hire in all areas of our life, right? So I am curious, what are some things you are doing in your own life to help hire and buy back more time?
Yeah. So in my own life, one of the things I did this summer is I live in Florida. My parents are snowbirds. They spend part of the year, actually spend most of the year in Florida now, and they go back up to New York for the summer. So we're always in charge of their pool because their house is actually right next door to us. And I'm always like, don't close down your pool for the summer because it's hot in Florida. We want to use it. So we're always in charge of taking care of it. And this summer, I'm just like, what am I doing? I don't have time to go and dump chlorine. Like, even though it's like a once a week chore, go check on it, check out the filters. I'm like, I don't have time for this. I just want to go and enjoy the pool when we have time. So I hired a pool guy to take care of their pool. That's one of the things that I did this summer, and it's been fantastic of not having to worry about cleaning a pool, taking care of like staying up on top of the chemicals. And just some of the other things, like to get time back in my own life, is we're carpooling for school.
Mm.
Our kids go to, I have two daughters, they go to private school, so there is no bus transportation. And there's another family that is going to the school as well. So we are carpooling together. That mom is taking the kids to school every day. And then my husband and I swap off of who's doing the pickup. So it is fabulous of not having to worry about who's going to go do this pickup and drop off every day because it's like an hour round trip.
Yeah. I also love that. If we can pause on that for a second, I say the term like buy back your time. And we talk about that, and you really touch on that in your chapter in your personal life and through hiring in your business, which we'll get to shortly. But we always think it has to be something like monetary, like, oh, I need to hire this person. And I love that you hired a pool person too, because they're a specialist. But sometimes it's also working together as a team and a village inside like your own house or your own community. So the fact that you're carpooling and it's like, hold on, we're all going to the same place, we all have the same mission. And then by splitting this up, we get to each have time back in our, like, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I talk about is like a lot of times when it comes to delegating, we're like, oh, I need to get something off of my plate. The first thing we always think about is who can take this over, like in my household.
Mhm.
But sometimes there is the truth that someone in your household can't do it because then that's just shifting the responsibility for you to them. And they might not have the time either. But in that situation, we're doing the driving, she's doing the driving. If we don't help each other out, we both have to do it. If we help each other out, only one of us has to do it. And we can share the responsibility. And it just takes a whole lot of an hour a day off of either mine or my husband's plate of getting the kids to and from school. And so it's a huge help. And then the other thing that we're not doing this yet, but one of the things that we looked into, because just kind of the same thing, but using your dollars to buy you back that time,
Mhm.
is one of our babysitters goes to college, one of the colleges that's right down the road from her school, from the girls' school. And I originally contacted her. I'm just like, hey, what's your class schedule? Could you possibly pick up the kids one day a week? One day a week, pick up the kids, drive them to either my office or to the house. So that way it's one more day of the week that I don't have to do it or my husband doesn't have to do it. And she was like, I would love to, but I'm actually studying abroad fall semester. So can we come back to it for the spring? So that's just another thing. I know another family that does this too. They have a sitter that picks up their kids one day a week. And that one day of cutting down that round trip commute to the school that can take, especially sitting in car line, can take an hour of time is worth those dollars to pay someone because you don't have to do it.
Yeah, and especially too, I mean, I'm sorry that she's abroad, so hopefully in the spring it all
Right?
works out, but it's one of those things where and it's not even, I think, just the time that and I notice this in my own personal life, it's not just the time it takes me to do the activity, it's the fact that I then need to block everything around it, right? Because I'm like, "Okay, if I need to be here at this time, that means I can only get this many things done in the time before it, but if I don't have fully enough time, and then there's also, like, that mental load that I've been reading about this a lot personally, is, like, mental load and task switching, right? So the fact that you're also people think it's like, "Okay, I'm just gonna pause what I'm doing, go get the kids, come right back, and get back into my task." No, 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 right? Like, we're human beings. We need that time
Yeah.
to pause and be able to, like, "Okay, now I'm gonna go get them, but first I need to get gas, and I need to find my keys," and it's not just like a bing, bang, boom, it's all the time before and after as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that task switching and everything, it really does add up. It's, if you're working on something and you have to stop and then it's remembering, it's getting back into the flow. It's, those million other distractions that you're like, let me take care of that before I sit back down. And next thing you know, so much time has gone by. I know that like on the days that my husband gets the kids, that if I have that extra hour of getting work done, even if I'm like, okay, I'll be at the house by the time you guys get home, that extra hour of getting work done, I am so much more productive than if I go get the kids and then try to do an hour worth of work once I get back home. Because, yeah, I stopped doing what I was doing. I got out of work mode and I went and did something with my kids. And then I'm leaving my kids to get back into mode just to finish up something for an hour. And that hour is completely different and way less productive when I try to come back.
I also think, and yes, you're leaving the flow, and that's hard too. And there's also, I think, a different presence level. Like, I like to be done and finished with my day. So then when I go to another, activity, or I'm with friends or family and you're with your kids, there's also a difference between, like, you're hustling to go pick up the kids and, like, running, thinking in the back of your mind, "Oh my gosh, I have to get back to work. I have to finish this, da, 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 da." Whereas if you're also able to finish your work day or the task you're on, then go home and be with them, or then leave your home office to be with them, you can also then be fully present.
Yeah. Yeah, is 100% true. You can be fully present and in both things and not feel like you're constantly getting pulled back and forth. Because I feel like, especially moms, there's that feeling of always being pulled. I started my business while my youngest was home with me. So for 2 years before she started preschool, she was home with me. And sometimes there would be that guilt of, all right, she's playing. Let me jump on my phone and get some work done because she's playing independently and she needs to learn independent play and all that stuff. But then it's like, I'm not playing with her. I'm not interacting with her. But then it's like, but I need to get stuff done and I need to respond to this client and I need to schedule this meeting and I need to do this. And it's just like, there was that constant pull of I should be in both places at once. And we need to somehow build into our schedule opportunity where we can be just one place, where you can be just focused on work or just focused on the family or just focused on the extracurriculars that you like to do or your dog or whatever it is.
And there's something that's so freeing about just being in that one place and being like, "No, this is my dedicated time to do this." And, like, as a society, we spend so much time being, "Okay, how productive can I be? How many things can I do at once? Can I go for a walk, listen to a podcast, walk the dog, then answer these emails and all these 5 other things?" And we're then doing so many of them, at least I find in my own personal life, poorly. And so for me, it's helped in my own business to start hiring. So you are the guru when it comes to hiring and growing your team, so much so that I even love your little sign behind you.
Thank you.
So, we've talked now a little bit about your growing your team in your family and in your personal life. How can that also then translate into your business? And what are some of the first hires that you typically see a lot of business owners doing? I'll also say this from the lens of I have a lot of clients who worked in corporate and then also started their own businesses, or they work in corporate and are building out like a team underneath them and don't know who they need to put in certain roles. So I've laid a lot out.
Yes.
Tell me everything.
Yeah. So I love talking about growing your team and getting help and getting support and everything. And I feel like this is always one of those questions that people ask, like, where should I start? They're looking for kind of that simple answer, like you should hire this person first. And like everything in business is going to be, it depends.
Yeah,
So I'm going to give you a few tips to how to really figure out where you should really start looking for first to get help and support.
I love it.
So you really need to start looking at and creating a list of what you're working on, but more so the looking at the lens of what's always getting pushed to the bottom of your to-do list, but
Mhm.
then you're kind of beating yourself up over the fact that it didn't get done. So not so much that you're like, oh, I didn't get that done to that today. Like later you're like, oh my gosh, went through this entire week and I did not do one sales outreach. I know how that's going to impact me. I need to do better next week. And then next week it's the same thing. I didn't do any sales outreach this week. Or it could be that I really need to file these files away into my client folder so that way I can easily access it, but I never have time for that. So my inbox or your physical files on your desk or whatever it is, you're always saying, I need to do that because I understand the importance of doing it, but it's always getting pushed down to the bottom of my to-do list because something is more important or something brings me more joy to do it in my business. You then also need to think about what would you be able to do more of if there was two of you. So,
Mhm.
what are those things where you're like, if there was two of me, I could then be able to do this. I could serve my clients better. I could do these things and try to figure out if there was two of you. So someone just like you, your skills, your everything, what would go on that list? If there's two of you, I could be able to do this. And not just so much of I could double my clients, because obviously if there's two of you, you probably could double your clients, but what you could you be doing more and better with the clients that you currently have? So start thinking of those things. Start thinking about the things that you're not good at also. What are those things that take you 2 hours to do that you know someone it only takes other people an hour to do because you just struggle at it. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily that you're bad and horrible at it. You can find the time to do it, but it just takes you a long time. So you need to start creating this list. These are all the things that if you handed it off to someone else and it was someone else's responsibility, they would actually get done. Or you would be able to offer this to your clients and those things like that. So once you start looking at that list, I want you to prioritize it. What would have the biggest impact, or what would the impact for each item be? You can start with that. So you don't necessarily have to say what would be the biggest impact, but for each item, what would the impact be if someone else was responsible for it? So, like, let's talk about that sales outreach. All right. Well, if you're like, and I've been guilty of this, you go in from great months to horrible months, great months to horrible months with sales because you only make time for the sales outreach and stuff like that when you're like, oh my gosh, all my revenue is drying up because I'm finishing up my current projects. What am I going to do next week? Then that's one of those things is like, wow, if I had someone that was dedicated to that, it would keep a constant flow of revenue coming into my business. Or other things. If I had a second one of me and I could provide this to my clients, I could increase my fees because we're able to do more and it's, perfectly in line. If I was able to get this off my plate, this task that took 2 hours, I would be able to do this. And this is the impact that it would have on my business by saving those 2 hours and being able to dedicate that time somewhere else. So you start thinking about all those impacts that it would make to delegate those tasks to someone else and then start ranking it. What's going to have the biggest impact? And those are the things you want to start with first. And you can combine things. So if things are like, okay, these are all things that would fall under a general assistant. Well, create a role around a general assistant, but you know the top priority that that person needs to do. These are all marketing roles. Okay, your top things are marketing. Create a marketing position around some of the things that are on that list. Doesn't all have to be at the top, but at least you know marketing is what you need to get off your plates. Things like that, where you can start saying, this is going to have the biggest impact on my business. Because that's one of the things I really push for with a lot of people when they're hiring is you have to look is what's going to have an impact on your business and then hire the right person for your business. And you could have your business BFF that runs the exact same type of business in the exact same industry, serves the exact same type of clients, but their business is different than yours. So for example, just because they hired a virtual assistant that's helping them with XYZ doesn't mean you need a virtual assistant that's helping you with XYZ. It could be completely different tasks that you need a virtual assistant to do, for example, or maybe you don't even need a virtual assistant at all. Maybe what you need is a junior you that's going to help you with the client work.
Okay, I love all of this selfishly because you're speaking to me. I also think those tips are incredible because they apply to your personal life, whether you're in a corporate role, whether you're growing a business, like it's all about what's individual to you, right? We
Mhm.
all think, and I think that's one of the biggest, I think, issues in the social media world that we have now is okay, everyone's hiring a virtual assistant. So, personally, for the longest time, I thought I needed a virtual assistant. And then I started trying to hire for a virtual assistant role. And I was like, wait, a virtual assistant doesn't work in my business, right? Like, that's just not something I can't have somebody that's working internationally, unfortunately. Not that all VAs are, but I can't have somebody that's like, oh, if this person's out sick, another VA will fill in. Like, I don't have that kind of business as a financial advisor because of security and things like that. And so I was listening to all this business advice thinking, oh, this is what I need, right? Because everyone else has it. But it's so true. Somebody, when you mentioned hiring somebody to clean the pool, I live in New Jersey and I don't have a pool. So my hire for the summer is not going to be someone to be cleaning the pool, but it's going to be somebody to take my dog so I can stay on here. And so I think that I love that you take this individualized approach, right? And looking at, okay, here is what we need for our business. And also, too, I'd love to talk a little bit about people who are in kind of a more either senior role or have a more experienced business, some of the things they can be looking at as well, because I know this is kind of at the point where I am. So that's why I'm selfishly asking of,
Mhm.
okay, do we use the same tools to get to the next level? Like, what should we doing once we have a couple of people on our team and want to grow to that next level? And it could be the same
Yeah.
thing, so feel free to.
Yeah, I think that is that's a great question because I feel like this is where a lot of people get stuck and they're like, "Oh, I'm great at delegating because I have a team." But they're like, "But I still feel overwhelmed and what do I do next? And how do I continue growing this team?" And maybe you have a few junior team members, but you're like, "What's next? What's next?" You can still follow a lot of the same thought process and really figure out what is it that's taking your time. And
Mm,
one of the things that you might realize when you're going through that process of what's taking your time, what kind of drags you down, what is these things where you really need to get off your plate, it's no longer sometimes some of the executional type work, it's the higher level thought process.
yeah.
So it could be that the next person you need to hire is a manager to manage your existing team so you can put a layer between you and the people doing the work.
Mm,
It doesn't mean that you lose that complete relationship with them. It's just that sometimes you need someone who's going to be there answering their questions. Because can your team operate if you're never around to answer their questions because you're always out in the field networking and building up that new book of business or things like that, or you're always away on client meetings and things like that. And they need someone who is going to be able to answer the phone, who's going to be helping them with performance challenges and things like that. So sometimes you need that extra layer of management. Sometimes you need that layer of strategic thinking. So it might be that you do a fantastic job of getting stuff done, but you just need that extra person that's going to help you think of the bigger picture, think of what's next. For example, you might have people on your team that are executing the marketing strategy to help market your business, but who's coming up with all the ideas? Do you have to communicate everything down? And if you're not a marketing person, should that really be your responsibility, even if you're good at it? So it's like some of those things, it's like, where do you need that higher level support in your business? To give you an example here is I was brought in with a company that they were expanding from one state and opening an office in another state. So I was mostly focused on, they're like, this other office is going to be operating completely independently. So we're kind of treating it as a sister business. So to them, it was like, this is a small business. So come in and help them. Because I really help with small businesses hire and expand in who they need on their team. So, but while we were doing that and while we were hiring the team for that kind of like sister business, I was in touch a lot with the CEO because she was talking and seeing how everything was going and all that stuff. And she realized through our conversations that even though she had 200 people on her staff, they were making over $30 million a year, that she was holding too much onto her plate. She didn't have the right C-suite that she needed. And we took her role and split it into 3 full-time C-suite roles.
In addition to her, so she now had a
In
4 person.
addition, so it was her role and 2 others. So 3
Okay,
total,
okay, so
including
3.
her. So full-time role. So this wasn't just like, oh, I'm identifying that I need some additional support here. She was doing the work of at least 3 people. And so it's one of those things, it's like, we really sometimes need to get that higher level thought process off of our plates. Like, we don't need to be in charge of every department of our organization. Even if it's a small business and we're just like, well, it's all one department. It's because we're not big enough yet. Well, marketing's marketing, sales is sales, execution, like client operations is client operations, customer service, depending on where you're in, is another department. Like, there's all these different departments that make up your business. And right now you're in charge of all of it. Sometimes you need to stop being in charge of all of it and you can start overseeing all of it from that higher level perspective. You know what everybody's doing. You know that the ship's going in the right direction, but you have different people overseeing the work and overseeing the thought process and overseeing the strategy for each one of those.
I will say it's equal parts, scary and empowering to let go of tasks, because I think what you also brought up is so true, where it's like, you can bring in a marketing person and that marketing person can probably do what you're doing in a half the time or a third of the time, and they are a specialist in that. And so by this CEO that you worked with bringing in these other people, not only is it freeing up her plate, it's also like they are probably going to be able to do it, 10 times better than she can. And I think that's one of the hardest things as a business owner to let go of, is like, but it's my baby. And that goes into our personal lives. And that's the biggest thing is I've let go of in my business and at home, is like, this person can go do it because I almost don't care what it looks like at the end, right? Like, if my groceries make it to the front door, who cares if I have this brand banana or this? As long as the banana is at my front door, I don't care. That's obviously a very generalized example,
Right?
but it's just like, okay, great. Like, if the Canva templates got done and I have like the final draft and it looks great, I don't care if it took them however many steps to get there, as long as I just have it. Like, you're freeing up that capacity and time,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly.
The last question, I shouldn't say last, but my next question ask you is virtual, hybrid, in person. Can you share a couple things that people can do to kind of navigate this world and this landscape, especially as they are growing their teams?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is do whatever you feel is right and best for your business. So if your industry is all virtual, but you're like, I just feel most comfortable with in-office staff, then have in-office staff. You get to control what your team looks like.
Yeah.
Yes, that means that you might hire different people because there's people that want to be 100% virtual and don't want to come into an office every day of the week. All right, you're just looking at a different candidate pool, and that's okay. You need to hire the people that best fit for you. So some things, if you're like, well, I don't know, what should I do? One things I will say is if you work out of your home office, no one's really going to feel comfortable coming to your house every day to do work. So if you're working from your home office, chances are you're going to have a virtual team. I will tell you, one of my first jobs, I went to my boss's house. She had a huge house, so she had separate offices. Like she had an office, her husband had an office, and then she had a spot set up. It was me and another worker. It was awkward as can be to constantly be in their home. Like even though we had an office space, walking into your boss's house every day and feeling like you're in their personal space and stuff every day just didn't feel good. So if you're at a home office and you don't want to work outside of the house ever, you're probably going to have a 100% virtual team. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they can't be local and that you can't have local meetups where say, every Monday morning, we're going to go to the coffee shop and have an in-person meetup. You can totally do that. You can have in-person meetups and stuff with that. Just don't force them to come to your house every day because that's just going to be uncomfortable for both sides in the long run.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants that.
Um, yeah, yeah, no, it's like even when I hired, so I now have an office outside of the home because I just reached the point where I'm just like, I am tired of being in my house, like what sometimes feels like 24/7. So I need to be able to get out of the house. I still work from a home every once in a while, but now I have an office outside of the home. But when I was hiring my very first employee, even the last round of interviews, I was like, I want to meet them in person, but what do we do? And I gave people an option. I was like, well, you can come to my house for this interview. We can go meet up at a coffee shop if you want to have an interview in front of other people, or we can do it virtually. And so I let people pick what they felt most comfortable with before we had that for that final interview. But going back to the question at hand, like what should your team look like? I will tell you, there are people out there that want to work 100% remotely. There are people that want to work 100% in office. But what I'm finding really works for the majority of the workforce is some sort of hybrid.
Mm.
So if you're hiring for a role where they do not have to be 100% in person based on the type of work that they're doing, because obviously if they're greeting customers that walk in the door, they need to be there in person every day. You can't greet customers walking in the door if you're not there. But if you're hiring someone that is an assistant and just doing all computer-based work, that they don't necessarily need to be there in an office. A lot of people are looking for that hybrid work because they want the flexibility of, all right, if I don't need to go into the office, why do I have to go into the office? But I still want that connection. I want that drive to get out of the house every once in a while. I want to be around people in some sort of capacity. So I really think hybrid roles work best if you have the office space for it and it works best for the role. One of the things, if you're hiring 100% remotely, do keep in mind that you have to follow the employment rules wherever that a person lives. So if you're hiring out of state, you have to make sure you follow the rules for that state, which also sometimes means you need to register your business in that state in order to be able to pay payroll and taxes in that state. There are some states where there are certain cities that have their own set of employment laws. So New York City has different employment laws than the rest of New York states. And so those are things you just have to be aware of if you're hiring people to work remotely and they're not in the same city and state or county as you. Just do a quick search to make sure that you want to hire someone that's in that city, state, or county. Because sometimes it's a pain in the butt. I will give you just one thing. If you don't live in California, be careful hiring people in California because California has some of the strictest employment laws. And they're there for good reason. I'm not saying they're bad laws. They're there to protect employees. But if you are a small business going to hire some of your very first employees and you're trying to figure out your state laws and what everything you have to do, and then you're adding this complexity on, you need to make sure you're doing things right. Otherwise, you're putting yourself at high risk. And that's just the one thing you want to be conscious of is the risk that you're putting yourself in when you hire people in certain states that are different than yours. Because saying, I didn't know, I wasn't aware,
It doesn't
is
fly.
not going to help you if someone decides to come and sue you because you didn't offer them the right amount of sick leave or vacation, or you didn't pay their taxes correctly.
That is so valuable and such a good reminder. I also am somebody who used to work in New York City and lived in New Jersey, so that the taxes and the laws and everything in there were so different, even though it was, just right across the state border. And it's true. And we don't think about it, especially when you're on the small business side. And it's also a hard thing, I will say, to navigate when you have people that are like, well, I work here sometimes and then I work there sometimes. And you're like, so what state do I consider you to be in? And so I think it's amazing to have somebody like you as a resource who can talk about what makes the most sense, what state are they in, and also what type of role should we be hiring for. I'll also add that I have somebody who is she's a virtual assistant for me, but functions so much more than I think, what we call like a VA. She is virtual and she is my assistant. And she and I are gonna meet up, she'll be out in the area one week in the spring. So she and I are like, okay, let's meet for dinner. And that way too, we can still have that in-person human connection, even though she's halfway across the country. And I think that really makes the difference too in building a team is being flexible and commenting and saying like, "Oh, I'll be in your city or I'll be in the area." Like, let's find a way to meet up, even if it is a fully virtual role.
Yeah. One of the things that have seen work really well is if you're hiring teams that are fully remote and they're full-time workers, scheduling some sort of retreat once a year where you're flying your employees in to a location. Maybe it's where your office is at, or maybe you're meeting up someplace else, and just getting that we are getting together, we are a team, we are doing team building, we are doing our strategic planning and all that stuff, and making them feel a part of everything versus always being these remote employees that feel no connection to the company. Because you just want to make sure you set things up so they feel connected to the company. And I do love that you talked about how your VA is not like a typical VA. And
Yep.
that's why I always say one of those things is if you're hiring a virtual assistant, you really need to do your due diligence on what you're hiring for, because that is the most generic title out there. And VAs are great, but just because they're great at what they do doesn't mean they're right for you. So find the VA that is right for you and don't just hunt for someone that's a virtual assistant. Make sure you're really task focused.
Yeah, that was my biggest lesson of the summer of 2023. So if anyone ever has any, wants to hear some horror stories, I can tell you for why you need to use somebody like Jamie to help you strategically grow your. And I also like the idea of team, right? This is not just like a hire. And I think as business owners, we sometimes get in this like frenzy of, oh my God, I need to hire this person and I need to put someone in this role and da da da. Rather than also like creating that list that you talked about and slowing down and utilizing somebody like you to strategically hire and put someone in this role. So you really are building a team and a company culture. So when you can go on retreats like this and people are excited, not like, oh my God, I'm going with my boss and my team and we're going here and it's going to be terrible. Like, you want people to be excited and love what you do, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure it changes things drastically from the
Oh
employee's
yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, you want people that are connected to your organization on a personal level. They want to feel, you want them to feel passionate, because those are the employees that are going to do well and the employees that are going to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. So my final question for you, what is one thing that you do to make yourself feel like a wealthy woman?
Ooh, a good question. Um, so one of the things that we do, we've been doing this, my husband and I, since really we started dating. And I am very much of, you get your paycheck, you split it into all the buckets that we always have your savings and stuff. So kind of like the pay yourself first and all that, those
Love it.
things. And one of the things that we did early on is having a fun account.
The
So we
fun
have our
one.
savings account. That's like the rainy day account. We have, now that we have kids, like I mentioned, that go to private school, we have their school account. We have our daily spending. We have our monthly spending account for all our recurring bills and all this stuff. But then we have a fun account. And that is our account where it's like, we use it for vacations. We do it for random fun things, all those things where you're just like, well, I really want this, but can I justify it in my monthly budget? It's like, well, this is what we have this fun account for. It's to have fun. It's to be able to do those things and buy those things and not have to stress too much about it. Obviously we're still can't go well outside of what's in that account, but at least it allows us to be able to have fun and not feel like we're always focusing on the bills that need to get paid, that we're focusing on having a good time.
Oh, that is music to my ears. I love a fun fund or a fun account. And it's the perfect thing because it's kind of that guardrail of, okay, can we afford to buy a yacht right now? Well, the fun fund said no. So maybe we have to settle for going on like a one night cruise as a date night around like a harbor near us or something like that instead of, going to this extreme. And so I think it's the perfect way to enjoy life and remember, it's not just all work and paying bills, and we get to live our wealthiest, most exciting lives. Jamie, thank you so much for hopping on today. Where can people find you and connect with you if they need to talk more about growing their teams? And please share everything.
Yeah, so you can learn more by going to growingyourteam.com. You can connect with us. You can listen to the Growing Your Team podcast. And if you want to schedule a call, you can go to growingyourteam.com/jumpstart, and we can jump on a call and talk about what your next steps should be when it comes to hiring.
Yeah. Amazing. And we will be linking all of Jamie's social media and links here that she just mentioned in the show notes and the description. And make sure you grab a copy and read her chapter in Rise and Find coming out November 14th. Thanks again for hopping on.
Thank you.